Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly, an EFL special, the hottest football matches since John Aldridge at USA 94, a lot of cramp and sweat, and in the end Hull, Bolton and Notts County end up victorious. In spygate terms, probably a good thing that Hull City won. Oli McBurnie right at the death. They stayed in the Championship last year on goal difference and now they're in the Premier League. It was a tight game between Bolton and Stockport for an hour or so, but in the end the Trotters run away with it, while our Salford destined to be in League Two forever after Notts County sweep them aside. We'll do a little on the England squad, eye-roll Baz, we're heading well and truly into wedding season in the correspondence, all that plus your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
It's a Not the Top 20 takeover as we celebrate their Christmas, of course. George Elek, hello.
Hi, Max.
Hey, Ali Maxwell.
Morning, guys.
Let's begin then with the Championship playoff final. Hull 1, Middlesbrough 0. Hull promoted to the Premier League. I suppose, George, must have been a very interesting week or two to be the host of the world's premier EFL podcast, mustn't it?
It's been quite good for business, it's fair to say. The spygate content has done okay for us because it felt like it's the first time basically ever that EFL news has been kind of the sporting news in the country. As we said, on the day that Arsenal won the Premier League title, the lead story on BBC News at 10 was Spygate and Southampton being chucked out of the playoffs, which was pretty incredible. So yeah, it's been really fun. As you say, given the controversy that would have come about had Middlesbrough won this playoff final, you even had the Hull owner, Ashen Ilushali, on Wembley Way being interviewed before the game, announcing, which was also then BBC breaking news, that he would be taking legal action if they didn't win the game, which kind of set the whole game up.
Power play before a match, isn't it?
I know. I actually then saw him walking on Wembley Way with about 1 million bodyguards around him shortly afterwards. There are a couple of things to this. Firstly, it's great that we're not going to have any complaints over who the promoted teams are in any kind of more arbitration panels or anything like that. Secondly, it means that next season we're going to have 2 games between Middlesbrough and Southampton. And I think we can all agree that it should be the first game of the season live on Friday night because it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Ali, to this game, and Hull probably haven't been talked about. Like I was thinking about this, I had quite a few TalkSport shows when Spygate happened and during and afterwards in pods, and I think we probably didn't really. If you're a Hull fan, you're like, we're in the playoff final for goodness sake, and now they've won the playoff final. We're not even leading with them.
Yeah, I got the sense that there was a lot of Hull City fans and those at the club sort of trying desperately to go like, we're actually in this and we still don't know what time kickoff is 3 days before the game. I think everyone made it. I don't think in the end that, the stories I was reading of people flying over from Australia and potentially going to miss the game through the uncertainty, obviously, thankfully they were all there and they were treated to a brilliant performance. This whole team have had such a funny season because, as you mentioned, they stayed up on goal difference last season and they had over the summer a transfer limitation, if you like. It wasn't that they couldn't sign anyone, but they couldn't pay any fees. So it was just frees and loans. Within that, Oli McBurnie, who scores the winner, is one of the free transfers and surely one of the greatest free transfers ever, given the monetary value of promotion to the Premier League as much as the glory as well. And they had a new manager in Sergej Yakirovic, who'd had a great record in Bosnia and in Croatia and had done pretty well in Turkey. The owner, Ajun, who'll be delighted that he's already got so many mentions on this podcast. He doesn't shy away from the limelight. His nickname when he first came over was the Turkish Simon Cowell, because he made his money syndicating all of those sorts of shows over in Turkey. He's been a pretty lively owner of Hull City so far. They have bought and sold dozens of players. They've bought a lot of players from overseas. Some of them have been great. Lots of them have been complete waste of money. And his managerial hires had been pretty rogue as well in a way. Like he hired Shota Arveladze and it was an absolute disaster. Then he hired Liam Rosinha and it went pretty well. Then he sacked Liam Rosinha because he thought the football was boring, and they almost got relegated last season. So when he hires this guy Yakirovic, I think most observers would go, are they playing with fire here, getting someone that doesn't know the league? And instead, Yakirovic has been incredible all through the season, but particularly in these playoffs. he completely understood what was needed for Hull to progress and to win these playoffs, not conceding a goal, having conceded the 4th most goals in the whole championship throughout the season. So them being a really good defensive team was not the story of their season at all until it needed to be. And I think that's a real achievement for him as a manager, and that's what's, I think, taken them to the Premier League.
I believe that according to their XG, Hull should theoretically have been relegated. Instead, they've been promoted. Is this a damning indictment of the XG statistic? Is it just speak volumes about Oli McBurnie and Joe Gelhardt's finishing? Or what does it tell us?
I think it depends. There's like a common misconception of how XG is used. Like the people who rally against it and want to say that it's pointless and means nothing seem to have this idea that people want to replace it with goals, which just isn't the way that it's used. I mean, XG is a useful tool in order to understand, chance quality, and it can often flag up teams who are maybe playing worse than their results or playing better than their results. In Hull's case, there was a piece written on our website a few months ago about this, kind of trying to work out why their underlying numbers were so bad compared to their results. And part of it is because they had 2 players in Oli McBurnie and Joe Gelhardt who are elite finishers for the level, who even by their standards were having elite seasons. And that helps. Having good players helps. And it's interesting that they played against Middlesbrough, whose underlying numbers were the best in the league by miles under Hellberg, but they had basically no players who were clinical in front of goal and therefore missed loads of chances. Like, finishing is a skill, and it's an important skill, in the same way that having a goalkeeper who makes good saves is an important skill. And in Panda, Hull have a very good shot-stopping keeper, unlike Middlesbrough, who've got Sol Brynn, who's been one of their weakest players this season. So it tells a very good story of what's going on between both boxes. It's a helpful predictive tool. It's by no means, we've had some comments on our YouTube video saying, Hull are the death of XG. And I think that just kind of misses the point of what it is, basically. And the other thing to point out is that even though for much of this season, Hull may have been posting kind of unsustainable numbers, that wasn't the case in the playoffs. Like, they played 2 games against Millwall, they played a game against Middlesbrough, and apart from a disallowed goal for Millwall, none of their opposition ever got close to scoring. Like, Millwall didn't create anything of note that stood, and Middlesbrough didn't have a shot on target, I don't think, on Saturday. So the performances they put in over when it mattered in the playoffs was a masterclass from Jurkovic, and there was nothing unsustainable about that at all. They were the best team in the playoffs, and they won them.
That's over a 46-game period. It actually, the league table broadly, generally aligns fairly well with expected goals numbers. So it is certainly one of the greatest differences in finishing position to overall underlying numbers. But what's kind of worth pointing out is they were 3rd halfway through the season, having posted not very good numbers, and they were running very hot. The numbers did catch up with them. And that's kind of when George says, and this is how we prefer to use it, not to say anyone deserves anything, or not to say that they're rubbish or they're lucky, but as a predictive tool. It actually helps George and I when there's 72 teams to cover. You don't get it right all the time, but it's certainly, it is quite a helpful tool to predict future results. Probably better than, if you just predicted the team that had won the most games over the last 5 games, if that's what you use to predict the future, then they would win every game for the rest of the time. And we know that's not what happens, right? So with Hull, it did catch up with them. In the second half of the season, I think their record was about 12th in the league for 4 months or so, and they almost dropped out of the playoffs. So, it's that, the tweet I think that Barry would have seen, it's frustrating really, because it boils it all down in the most reductive way. It's a whole season's worth of good performances and then poor performances, good results and poor results, and none of it really matters, obviously, because you end up where you end up, and they made the most of their playoffs.
I mean, Barry, it wasn't a classic, was it? And George mentioned Sol Brynn, and however much of a weak link he might be for Middlesbrough, God, poor bloke. I mean, he's so desolate at the end, isn't he?
Yeah, look, playoff finals are often not good. I think the Bolton Stockport one, which we'll get to, was an exception. It's all about winning. And I remember being at the Championship playoff final last season with Wilson and his Mackem mates, and it was an okay game. I think Sunderland were probably a bit lucky, but it doesn't matter. It's all about winning, and if your team wins, it's a brilliant day. It's a fantastic occasion. If your team loses, you just get out of Wembley as quick as you can and you go home and try and put it behind you. So yeah, this wasn't a good game. The Middlesbrough keeper, look, it's a horrible thing to happen. There's lots of playoffs, or our colleague, Talksport colleague Mickey Gray is probably the poster boy for playoff misery, missing that famous penalty against Charlton Athletic. What was it, 30 years ago now or something? Was it 30 years? Crikey.
99, I think, was it? So,
96 or 7, I think.
Oh,
Well,
right,
anyway,
yeah.
whenever it was. I'm really feeling my age now. Yeah, it's all about winning. That's what playoff finals are.
I mean, to be fair to you, Barry, you don't need the hair transplant that Mickey Gray has had because your hair is absolutely stunning. But he makes him look younger than however long ago that penalty was. Look, we should talk about McBurnie, George, because like that's the key moment. And he was looking knackered. I mean, he's fair. He looked knackered after a minute because he was so hot, and and he's quite fair. But like, it's nothing more than right place, right time. That's what he's really good at.
I cannot stress to you how hot it was at Wembley over these 3 days, and I was sat in the nice seats down by the dugout, the whole dugout, and when Liam Miller came off after an hour, I thought he was going to pass out. He was so red, like it was boiling. And as you say, McBurnie puts a shift in. He has to lead the line for a team that basically don't have the ball. He's got to press the Borough centre backs, who for a lot of the game were just knocking it between themselves, probably trying to get Hull to kind of chase shadows. But he'd come closest earlier in the game. He'd started the move. He got the ball on the right-hand side, played a huge diagonal to Ryan Giles, busted gut to get in the box and headed the ball onto the bar. And then he started the move that led to the goal with the ball coming, bit of hold-up play, ball going out to Hirakawa, the substitute, who has been a really good pickup, an impact player who comes off the bench on loan from Bristol City. A lot of Bristol City fans are wondering why they're watching one of their players assist a goal in a playoff final. And the cross came in, and Bryn, I think, tried to catch it and just basically parried it into the path of McBurnie, who steered it in, whipped his top off, ran celebrating in front of the Middlesbrough fans. And yeah, for him to be a free transfer, this is also in the context of him having just been left out of the Scotland squad. Again, a lot of Scotland fans probably watching on Saturday thinking, yeah, could probably do with a guy like this this summer, but he won't be there. But he's just a brilliant goal scorer, a very good footballer. And I just think one of those players that, and this wasn't always the case early in his career, but now as he's a more senior pro, just the kind of player you want at your club, like someone who you can see really, really cares, someone who has the quality, who scores goals. And I'm excited to see him be the kind of the poster boy, I guess, for Hull in the Premier League next season.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting, Ali, to see who the other poster boys are. I think it was their manager. It might have been their owner. I was listening to afterwards talking about how that Sunderland have been a good model, which would suggest they're going to buy 15 players and we won't see any of these lot, in the Premier League next season. But it's probably fair to say they need some reinforcements.
Yeah, I think so. That's, I think there is always something to be said for if you have a group of players that have achieved together, that reflects the fact that they understand each other very well. They have a good team spirit generally, that kind of telepathy, if you like, having built a unit together. And in most cases, when you move up a level, I do believe generally in at least making sure you don't completely blow that up. But it does seem, particularly if we're just looking at this season's sample size of promoted clubs, that actually the most important thing is to buy £120 million worth of 6'3" athletes, particularly in midfield. Hull are going to need that. Gelhardt's
do you think,
on
Ali?
loan.
Do you think that's interesting that it's physicality that Sunderland and Leeds went for? When you sort of in your mind you imagine the Championship is as physical as the Premier League, it's just not as technically good.
Yeah. The Championship's very physical, but I think it's just like, it's sort of like Diet Coke to full fat Coke. It is physical, and it is, that is a correct way of describing the Championship, but possibly more so the endurance that you need because it's a 46 game season rather than 38. Like everyone in the Premier League, this is, probably complete rubbish, but it feels like in the Premier League they are all 1 to 2 inches taller on average. They are all stronger. They are all faster. And, you know, the incredible changes in terms of how teams approach set pieces has meant that, you know, anyone looking for marginal gains is now wants to be taller in order to defend set pieces better, in order to attack set pieces better. And so, yeah, Hull's squad definitely needs some reinforcements. But it's, you know, no one ever buys a whole starting 11, right? I know Try Hume, for example, I think he played in every game for Sunderland this season. There are players in that squad who can step up and who will have to step up. But yeah, you should be excited to follow their transfer business this summer because, as I said, under the owner, I mean, he just loves buying players, and he will buy players from everywhere, and sometimes they might be players with strong links to the Turkish Super League, so we might see some quite entertaining signings. You know, a lot of the Streets Won't Forget Premier League players that end up in the Turkish Super League might be coming back to Hull. He's quite keen for Hull
Hakan
City.
Suker.
yeah. Emre Belözoğlu will be there in midfield, the 5'3". He's keen for Hull to be seen as like the representative of Turkish football in the Premier League. And George said he saw him with a lot of bodyguards. There was certainly some Twitter rumours I saw that some of the guys he was with are basically the Avengers of Turkish billionaires who are now all like, yep, let's do this all together. So they are going to be a fascinating addition to the Premier League for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Sunderland, Trey Hume and Dan Ballard are basically the only two players who won promotion last season who were first team staples for Sunderland this season in the Premier League. Luke O'Nien as well, to a lesser extent, after he came back from injury. But that was it. Everyone else. And Sunderland's recruitment last summer, I don't know if they just got really lucky or their recruitment department is brilliant, but pretty much every single signing they brought in, with one exception, Simon Adingra, was a success.
Baz, just quickly, as a Sunderland fan, I'm trying to work out whether you absolutely adore Luke O'Nien because of the incredible journey that he's been on with Sunderland Football Club versus the fact that he keeps writing quite clearly ChatGPT draft ghost written LinkedIn style tweets about his journey and leadership. And I never dreamt of making the Europa League because why would I have done? I was playing for Hemel Hempstead in the National League South. Like, I'm trying to work out how that squares off with you.
I very much like Luke O'Nien. He seems like a lovely fella, but yes, he is a bit Jake Humphrey for my too Jake Humphrey for my tastes. But you know, to each their own.
Yeah, he's setting himself up well for post career, and fair enough, because his journey and his story is. It actually is very inspirational, and it should be very inspirational, and therefore fair play to him. Yeah,
and him and that cabbie on Sunderland Till I Die. I mean, frankly, the two nicest people you've probably ever seen on television.
Going back to Hull, you do have to wonder if they're one of their biggest or best players they've ever sold in Jared Bowen, who's now headed to the Championship. Surely, you've got to think that Ashen will be looking at Bowen and thinking he's someone that he'd like to bring back to Hull as a bit of a statement as to their return to the Premier League.
I mean, there's no way, is there? I mean,
it costs £1 Well, unless the only way possibly is if West Ham can persuade him to basically loan him out for a season whilst they're in the Championship, as some relegated teams have done, in order to be like, then if we're back up, then he can come. You know, we'll still have you when we're back in the Premier League. But let's see. Yeah.
Get Andy Robertson back as well, like a Hull reunion, couldn't they? A quick word on Middlesbrough. Oh yeah, a quick word on Gary Pallister. This could be good. Oh no, that's
Giovanni,
Middlesbrough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bullard, of course.
Kevin Kilban.
They 6 games at Wembley without winning there for Middlesbrough, right? I mean, Kim Hellberger's done brilliantly. He's come out really well from the whole Spygate situation, I think, you know, as a guy who loves the club and loves football and speaks so well about it. They will go again, presumably. They'll probably lose Hayden Hackney. I don't know who else they'll lose.
Yeah. I mean, I think a few Southampton fans have just thrown their phone against the wall hearing you say he's come out of this well, because they do not agree. But yeah, I agree. Honestly think he's the most exciting manager we've had in the Championship since Bielsa, in terms of the playing style he's implemented. And in my mind, he has a squad of players that are in no way suited to play the style of football that he wants, and yet he's still turned them into a very good team. I think they will sell Hackney. I think that's no bad thing. loads of examples in recent history of clubs cashing in on their best players at the right time and using that money to reinvest. You look at Sunderland and Jack Clark. Sunderland fans obviously weren't happy to lose him, but the sale enabled them to kind of reinvest and push in that promotion season. It happens consistently, and I think that even though fans hate losing their best players, you've got to capitalise on it when you have a talent that's worth tens of millions of pounds. And I'm sure they'll do that this summer. Similarly with Morgan Whittaker, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he moves on too. And I would back them if they can bring in the type of player that Hellberg needs to play his style. I think they're going to be very, very strong next season. And there's an extent, and it won't feel like this for Borough fans, there's a degree to which I kind of wonder if maybe not going up this season could be quite a good thing for them. I'm not sure they necessarily would have been suited for promotion now. Playing this way, I think it would have been hard for them. With a manager who plays such kind of high risk, aggressive attacking football. You look at Sunderland as a blueprint, who under Labrie, don't play that way and have been kind of the bit of a seamless transition up to playing in the Premier League because they're already playing a style where they're happy to concede possession a lot of the time. It'll be the same for Hull at the beginning of next season too. So, Borough are definitely one to watch out for. They are, even though those who watched the playoff final wouldn't have seen it, they are normally a very good watch and have a manager that I think is going to be a bit of a star in those circles. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being one of the elite.
Ali, what happens to Southampton now? How badly damaged is their reputation? Is he still there as we record?
He is still there as we record. Yeah, they must be reeling, obviously, and I suppose once the appeal was rejected, maybe it was should we have a week just to well, I was going to say relax. That's probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Take stock, I guess. I mean, it's going to be interesting, and I don't feel sure either way on exactly what they're going to do. I'd be fairly confident that Eckert won't be their manager next season. It's absolutely, I know we've already gone through this, it is absolutely insane what's happened. When you consider that guy is the youngest manager in the EFL, like 33, had put together a ridiculous winning run. He won Championship Manager of the Month 3 consecutive months to finish the season. So he's like the absolute flavour of the month, and now is like complete like villain of this ridiculous drama that's captured the attention so much. So I assume he won't be their manager. I mean, he may get a ban from the FA. He may well get a ban. We don't know yet. But I'm really interested to see what impact does this have on the club as a whole. Like, the fans are saying a lot about, having completely lost their trust in everything because they feel so let down by what's happened. That's understandable. They weren't very happy anyway because of the relegation, and they'd kind of just about parked that because they won every game for 4 months. So that's now dredged up again. The players, it was reported at the time that they were considering their options legally in terms of, could they work out that this was a potential loss of earnings for them or loss of opportunity for them, which was, came from a poor decision made elsewhere or from cheating. And maybe, some of those guys will leave because they feel so let down by what's happened. I have no idea what the club is going to look like come August. And there's always a chance, as excitable as everyone gets, there's always a chance that things are kind of fine. Like maybe they change manager in the next by mid-June. Maybe by the time the season starts, things feel different and look different there. And maybe once they start the season and they start playing football matches and start winning football matches, because they're still likely to have a good team, maybe things will be normal. Or maybe they will continue to be seen as this like incredible villain. I don't know. Like, do you really think it's going to last for years? Like Southampton as a hated club because of this? I can't see it happening.
I mean, I think people move on, and football moves on very quickly. But it's just mad that it's happened to such a bland, probably isn't the right word, but inoffensive club. Like, everyone kind of likes Southampton. They're fine. Southampton, nice little club.
Yeah.
So for this to happen to them,
produces great minds like Matt Le Tissier and Ricky Lambert.
Well, great player.
Yeah.
Two great players.
I mean, previously, the most controversial thing was how tight the goal nets were at the Dell, and it's gone to this. But I mean, like, I'm really torn, George. Like, it sort of depends who is most convincingly spoken to me last time, which is perhaps a sign of my own weakness that I just can't work out how egregious this crime is and how big a punishment should be. And you sort of feel for Eckhart, right? That this is clearly not the right thing to do, and reading out his messages, sort of telling young interns to do better and bring back better stuff and all that. It sounds bad, but it shouldn't be the end of his whole football career. He's clearly a brilliant football manager, right?
If I'm honest, I feel next to no sympathy for him from the bits that we're getting. And also the thing that's been lost here is that it's all we can go off is reports, right? Apart from when the EFL published the written findings last week, which was pretty damning on Eckhart, and it made it seem as if he had basically orchestrated a kind of premeditated covert operation to spy on the opposition team, which is bad. But there's also reports that when the news first came out, that Southampton's first defence was to say that the intern analyst was working as a lone wolf, which is absolutely ridiculous. That was their first defence. And then there was the story saying that Tonder Eckhart didn't know that it was illegal, which is also absurd, given that he was Barnsley's assistant manager however long ago. Reports that he's been involved at clubs that have previously, and the German national team that have previously, had accusations thrown at them of this in the past too. Like, it feels like they've tried to squirm out of this. Well, he has tried to squirm out of it a fair bit. It seems pretty obvious to me that both the treatment of his staff and also the way that he went about trying to gain an advantage was not particularly good. The conversation around how much an advantage do you actually get is, in my mind, totally and utterly irrelevant, because
I agree with
obviously
that.
It was enough to make them do it, especially in the context of the Middlesbrough game, where the best player in the Championship, player of the season, Hayden Hackney, was very deliberately being kept. His availability for the game is being kept in the dark by Middlesbrough. They weren't confirming if he was available or not. So even just by going up there, seeing that he wasn't on the pitch and getting back in the car and driving back down again would have been of a kind of a fair benefit to them. So my assumption is, the FA are investigating now. My assumption is that we probably won't see Tonder Eckhart managing in this country for the foreseeable future. And I have very little sympathy for that. And to Barry's point, my hunch is that if Eckhart leaves, then a lot of the animosity will end up being directed at him rather than the club, would be my guess, because it feels like he's the villain of the piece here rather than the club who'll be looking to make amends.
The Championship welcomed Burnley, Wolves and West Ham. West Ham expected to part company with Nuno Espirito Santo. As we suggested yesterday, the Championship, no place for a dying Jedi like that. Scott Parker, Gary O'Neill on the very boring but probably sensible shortlist there for the job at the London Stadium. And that'll do for part one. We will do the League One and League Two playoff finals in part two. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Bolton 4, Stockport 1. Bolton promoted to the Championship after 7 years away. This game, Barry, a bit more exciting than the Championship final the previous day.
Yeah, it was a good game. Bolton were worthy winners. I suppose it was interesting because the standout player of the match was on the losing team, Adama Sidibe, who played for Stockport County and was somewhat strangely, in my opinion, taken off after, I think it was 65 minutes. I thought maybe it might have been because of the heat or he picked up an injury, but he was clearly very angry at being taken off. So I must confess, he's a fella I've never heard of before Sunday, but I suspect he will have quite a few suitors on the back of that performance alone. Louis Barry, who Stockport County brought in to try and get them through get promoted and through the playoffs, he did not have a good game. But Bolton, I think, were worthy winners, and I was quite pleased for them because a friend of mine, Jack Jackson, was at the game. He's a big Bolton fan. His brother's a Chelsea fan. And Jack had a very nice day out with all the clampets who came down from Bolton to go to Wembley.
Jack, Paddy McGuinness and Vernon Kay. What a lovely day it was for all of them. What did you make of it, George?
Yeah, I totally agree with Barry about Sidibe. He only came in January from St Johnstone, having spent a lot of his previous career in non-league, kind of in the Stockport area. So maybe it's just a case where, even though he's not young, I think he's 27. He was brilliant in that hour that he was on, and he caused Bolton a lot of issues with their high line, with his pace in behind. Scored a goal that was disallowed using VAR, that I think was the right decision, but I know a lot of Stockport fans I think it was quite harsh. But he then scored a very, very good header to equalise. And it felt like Bolton's substitutions really worked. They brought on Sam Dalby, who is a target man for the last half an hour of the game. He set up, or he played a part in setting up the goal to make it 2-1 as soon as he came off the bench. He then scored an overhead kick. And it felt like basically the best player on the pitch was Stockport's, and he came off. And then the best player on the pitch came on for Bolton, and that kind of really swung the game in their favour. Bolton were absolutely brilliant in the second half. And, as a Bolton fan, having been at Wembley 2 years ago and lost 2-0 in a game that your team didn't turn up in at all, the season before that, they lost over 2 legs against Barnsley. To have that second half where you see 3 goals in front of you on a hot Wembley day, like they were loud, they didn't stop in the whole second half. It must have been an unbelievable hour or so to be a Bolton fan. And Stephen Schumacher's done a very good job. He's been well supported. This was the aim, and the expectation was that they would get promoted, and they've done so through the playoffs. Deserving winners on the day, and it was, as you guys have said, a very good playoff final.
Yeah, and Ali, Dalby, that like both the touch to sort of to be part of that second goal was because the ball came into him so fast, and he cushions that so well, and then his strength before the overhead kick is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely to see you show such appreciation for the specifics of hold up play, and target man play. Always. It's having a real resurgence, isn't it? So, I'm sure a lot of your Cambridge United heroes growing up showed deftness of touch like that. Not everyone does. It was brilliant. George is right when he says Schumacher's been well supported. What he means is they've got a really good squad, and that means they're able to bring Dalby off the bench. They had a guy on loan from Celtic called Johnny Kenny. He was injured here, but in the second half of the season, Dalby would play up top with Kenny, and that gave them a whole new dimension with a target man, a speedster, plus the tricky wingers they've got, plus the technical midfielders they've got. The defence stood up really well during the playoffs. Chris Farino in particular, I felt, had a fantastic playoff campaign. So, he had the better options off the bench, and he used them to good effect. It feels funny because 4-1 is a pretty standout scoreline in a playoff final. It feels very rare that you get that. And yet, Stockport, it wasn't a 4-1 game, if that makes sense. Like up until the hour mark, it easily could have gone either way. And yeah, certainly in the first half, Stockport looked incredibly dangerous. So two really good teams going at it, and a much more entertaining game than Saturday's Championship playoff final. So great to have Bolton back in the Championship. People will probably know, but may have forgotten that they suffered back-to-back relegations from the Championship down to League Two in the midst of administration, points deductions. One of the most memorable things that we've covered really was them putting out a team the first or second game of the season in League One with a load of 17, 18-year-olds. They didn't have any senior players for a few months, and the regeneration of that club under the owner Sharon Britton and her team has been absolutely magnificent, and they're now back in the Championship, where certainly in terms of size of fan base, that's absolutely where they deserve to be. Over 20,000 fans in League One, so they'll be contributing to a pretty intriguing Championship next season, I think it's fair to say.
George, worth mentioning Kyle Wootton. Poor guy scores his own goal. It's not his fault at all, isn't it? The ball's parried into his path. But just the fact that Stockport were playing with their top scorer, and a centre forward in a sort of Paul Warhurst. Is it a reverse Paul Warhurst? I can't remember. But he was a centre back who became a striker, wasn't he? A reverse Paul Warhurst, who went back to centre back and was doing a great job at centre back for Stockport.
Yeah, it's like Dion Dublin played a bit of centre back at the end of his career.
It's Dion Dublin the right way round.
Yeah,
Gary Doherty was definitely a DC/ST.
ST Dublin. It's and he played there for the end of the regular campaign in the playoff semi-finals as well, because of Stockport's injuries to their usual centre backs. And he did, the annoying thing, the frustrating thing for him is that, even though the headline will be that he scored an own goal, he played well. Like he dealt with The threat of Bolton really well in the first half. He was booked for a pretty rash challenge at one point on Ruben Rodriguez, and for the first goal that Bolton scored, it was thanks to a save from Corey Adai from a Thierry Gale shot that he really should have done better with. It was kind of a bit of a scuff from 30 yards, and I'm not entirely sure how Adai was slow down to it and how he didn't control the parry better. But for the own goal, it was a brilliant save. Cozy Dewberry set off down the right hand side, hit a really good shot across the keeper, and Adai managed to tip it away from goal. But Witten couldn't sort his feet out quickly enough to jump over the ball or get his feet away from it and diverted it in. So, one of the top scorers in the league, playing centre-back. He's a huge player for Stockport. It's going to be interesting to see what Stockport do now, because they've lost Simon Wilson, who's been a huge part of the really successful project that they've had over the last few seasons. He's going to kind of manage the football operations at Sheffield Wednesday under their new owners, which is going to change things. Dave Challoner has cut a pretty frustrated figure quite a few times this season, and after the game at Wembley on Sunday. So it's been an incredible kind of upward trajectory for Stockport over a fair few seasons under Challoner. But if there's a time where it feels like things might start to change a little bit, maybe Wilson's departure signifies that this might be it.
You mentioned, Bolton going up and Lincoln and Cardiff going up, contributing to Ali to quite an interesting championship next year, which perhaps we should have done in the previous part, but it's okay. I don't think it's not memento, is it? People don't mind about timelines on this podcast. How do you see that? Division? And then we'll ask you the same about League One.
Wow, I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. Playoff final
Good, you're
weekend
on the beach. I see. I like it.
Not on the beach. I only left TGI Fridays outside Wembley about 12 hours ago. I have not turned my attention to the 26-27 season yet. We've got a World Cup to cover with the England pod. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think with the Championship, you always start with the teams coming down. There's we're in a bit of a weird position where it's obvious that the teams coming down from the Premier League, they get stronger, it seems, in terms of the squads that they come down with, the players that stick around. It used to be the case that teams would come down from the Premier League and all their best players would go, I don't really fancy it. But I think now the Championship is seen as as good a league as basically any other in some of the top leagues in Europe. So for a lot of them, actually sticking around for a season isn't the worst thing in the world. So Burnley, for example, I know they've been poor again in the Premier League, but their squad looks incredible, to be honest, on paper. So that their manager hire will obviously make a big difference. But at the same time, we've had consecutive seasons where one of the teams coming down has gone down again in Leicester and in Luton. So those teams are always kind of, I would say, the main characters. And then you've got Birmingham and Wrexham came up from League One with tons of cash and ambition. Both finished top half, but outside the playoffs. They will be feeling very bullish about their chances. You've got Southampton, you've got Borough, who, both of those are really strong this season. Millwall finished third, and, their trajectory's been amazing, and the way that they've dealt in the transfer market gives you hope that they can build another even better team, maybe, for Alex Neil, who's an exceptional manager, and that's only, half a dozen of the teams. So, that's as good as I can give you. But, when I say it's intriguing, I really mean it. It was, even this year, the teams, it used to be the case on our pod that you could basically tell which Championship teams were poorly run and basket cases at worst, and generally they would go down. But now, I think the way that clubs are being run is just so much smarter across the board. They make fewer expensive mistakes in player recruitment. Possibly they make slightly better
apart from Southampton, perhaps.
Apart from Southampton, and so it just the water level has risen so much, and it's George's Oxford United, for example, they got relegated, and everyone's kind of patting them on the head, going you guys actually did really well. You really did your best. You weren't a terrible team. You're always competitive, even with a small fan base and a smallish budget. But unlucky, you just couldn't compete, and it's pretty
small
brutal
fan base. Unbelievable.
Objectively true.
George, Stephen Schumacher is one of many former Stoke City managers who has done what he did well at Plymouth. He's done well with Bolton. Couldn't get a tune out of Stoke, and that seems to be a problem at Stoke for good managers.
For everybody, yeah.
Alex Neil's another one who couldn't get a tune out of them.
Alex Neil, Michael O'Neill, who's just done a pretty good job when he went in at Blackburn. Nathan Jones, who's gone on to, I know Southampton didn't go to plan. Gary Rowett left Stoke and went to Millwall and had them on the fringes of the playoffs consistently. Mark Robins has a whole wealth of success in his managerial career, and there's rumours that he might be the next Stoke manager to be sacked imminently. I don't understand how Stoke can be so consistently poor, but yeah, it looks now, given the evidence at hand, if you don't succeed at Stoke, you're probably not going to have much trouble getting another job, because I think people are happy to write it off. And I wonder if Stoke will at any point will struggle to attract that kind of manager, because it is seemingly so difficult to succeed there. But when you consider the Coates family should be incredibly good owners, given the money that they invest in the club and also the patience they show with these managers for the most part, where like even though they've churned through them so quickly, they're normally given quite a decent opportunity. Schumacher's probably the only example where the fan base and from the outside it looked a bit harsh and looked a bit quick to move on from him. But yeah, he's a good manager. That's his second promotion out of League One. And I think Bolton will, the one thing with Schumacher is he's going to play attacking football. He's going to play on the front foot. And so I don't expect Bolton will be one of these teams that goes up and kind of reverts to a more defensive style. Whether or not that works or is conducive to an attempt to stay in the division, we'll have to see.
So then the League Two player final, it cut at one point late on to a Salford fan with like a programme on his head, like a hat, in the sun. He got one of the seats that was like directly in the sun. I mean, I hope since you went to all three, George, that you were at least in the shade for these. Reigate Rustler says, how satisfying was Notts County winning in front of Neville, Button and Becks? Does feel, George, that Salford will never ever leave League Two, like ever. They were good this year. I mean, like all it is, they were. I can say it now quite easily. They were pretty unlucky on the final day of the season not to get an absolute stonewall penalty, missed an absolute sitter. A goal would have put them up instead of Cambridge. I don't care. And then they was just very comfortably beaten, it seemed, in this game.
Yeah, I was really surprised to the degree at which Notts County were able just to really win the game with ease. Because Salford have been... they were very impressive over two legs against Grimsby in the playoff semis, where even though Grimsby kind of managed to force the game into extra time for the majority of it, Salford were by far the better team across the two legs against a very good Grimsby side. They've been strong at the back end of the season too. Carl Robinson has a really poor record in playoff campaigns. I think that was his fifth playoff that he's competed in as a manager, and he's yet to win one, which is a surprise. But yeah, they've been Notts County were by far the better team. Salford have reportedly a very big budget for the league. I have no doubt that will continue to be the case in the coming seasons. I expect they'll probably go up at some point. It'll be interesting to see if they decide to stick or twist with Robinson, because my assumption is that even though they'll appreciate that they got very close, the aim and the minimum aim probably for this season was to get promoted out of a league where 4 teams do go up. So be interesting to see what happens there. They've got a squad of players. Dan Udo, for example, was signed from League One when he was a good League One player last summer. In Ryan Graydon, they just cherry picked one of the best strikers playing in the league that they play in, which isn't really a normal thing to do in League Two in a January window. So they are MK Dons were kind of the real money bags team in League Two this season. They've gone up, coming second. I expect Salford to be right up there again next season.
Let's give some credit then to Notts County, Ali, especially pod listener James Belshaw, who I thought was still in goal for Harrogate, but he's at his boyhood club, Notts County. But it's just a brilliant day. But they have money as well, don't they? Which is not a crime, but they did really well in this game.
Well, they're a very interesting team, club. They have money, partly because they're the biggest fan base in League Two, so averaging over 10,000 in League Two, highest attendance in the league. So they have, you would say, therefore, you could be confident in saying they'd have among the highest organic revenue, if you like, in League Two, and that, I think their budget, based on what I know and have been told, would be around the kind of fourth to sixth mark in League Two. So no one's trying to pretend this is like a story of huge overperformance versus their budget. What's interesting about them is their owners, who are the Reeds brothers, they don't swallow 5 million quid's worth of losses every year like a lot of owners do in League Two. They are, from what I can tell, happy to lose £1 million a year, and that actually means that in many ways they're not able to be as competitive as Salford. So they have, as I understand it, incredibly strict like wage structure. They don't overpay their players. They have been incredibly smart in recruitment for many years now, starting in the National League, where they signed Ruben Rodriguez, who starred for Bolton at Wembley in League One, played for Oxford as well. They signed him from the was it like the Dutch second tier, Portuguese number 10. Alassane Jatta, who scored the first goal for them, is a Gambian striker. They signed him from Denmark, and he has scored basically 1 in 2, very healthy rate for 2 seasons now, 2.5 seasons now, I think. They had obviously Macaulay Langstaff, who they signed from Gateshead, now plays for Millwall, who scored 40 goals in a season for them. So they are a nice combination, Max, of wealthy, but also really smart with their money. And it reminds me a bit of Stockport County, who are, you sometimes get clubs who are so rich that they don't need to be that smart with their recruitment. They just buy the obvious players and the best players. And I would say Salford City are basically a good example of that. Broadly, they just sign experienced players who've played at a higher level, and they are quite good as a result. Notts County have taken a different approach, smarter approach, I'd say. And I think it's really, really interesting. So yeah, they are, I haven't used the word data, but you have to mention it with Notts County. The guys that own the club, they own a company called Football Radar. That's where they made their money, and that's how they bought Notts County, and they have applied all of their data analysis into running the club in terms of its recruitment, decision making, everything. They are probably the closest club in terms of how they are run to Tony Bloom's Brighton and Matthew Benham's Brentford, I would suggest, in the whole pyramid. And
right.
Yeah, some people say League Two's, it's probably really hard to be like that. Probably harder to be sort of data driven. You're definitely limited in where you can recruit from in League Two. You can't sign Venezuelan wonder kids, at the drop of a hat. But they're doing a pretty good job, and yeah, I find them a very intriguing club.
Yeah. So they've gone up with Bromley, MK Dons, you mentioned, and the Mighty U's. I imagine because it's so soon, so recently you were just in TGA Fridays, George, unless Ali was there without you. I presume you spend every minute together, that you can't tell me exactly how the Mighty U's will do in League One after you predict us to finish, I think, 18th in League Two.
He left a couple of hours before me to start his research for next season.
Well,
so
we know which one. We know who's the professional one of the two, Ali. We know that,
Given, Max, that our team is going to be playing in the same division next season.
Yes, yeah.
I've already put some thought into this, I must say. It's all I think about when I go to bed is how strong will League One be next season.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is we don't know, because you've got two giants, basically, who in Leicester and Sheffield Wednesday, where there's so much that is unknown about the state they're going to be in. Like Leicester obviously have an absurd amount of talent for a League One team, but we have to assume the likes of Abdul Fatawu and Sefi Mavididi and these players will be leaving this summer. We also don't know who their manager's going to be. They've also reportedly taken out massive loans against their parachute payments, and may have to act accordingly in terms of, or should be acting accordingly in terms of preserving the long-term future of the club rather than throwing everything at getting promoted this time around. So Leicester could be the best team we've seen in League One in a long time in terms of talent, or they could be made up of young players and they'll have to, really clear the decks. Similarly, Sheffield Wednesday come down as a team that have had to clear the decks because of the issues post the Chansiri era, but they've got a new owner in David Stork. They've appointed Simon Wilson. That looks like a very smart bit of kind of recruitment in terms of the football ops side. But we have no idea who their players are going to be. We have no idea how deep Stork's pockets are. Like, we just don't know. So when you consider those two are the bookies' favourites to win the league, and we genuinely have absolutely no idea what state either of them are going to be in, it's pretty hard to work out how strong the league is going to be. Luton, obviously, you'd expect to be kind of there or thereabouts again. Oxford, I'm sure, will definitely have, I'm pretty sure we'll have aspirations to get promoted straight away back up to the Championship rather than consolidating. And then MK Dons, I expect, will have one of the biggest budgets in the league again. So there aren't, sitting here now, there have been times in the past where you look at a team in League One, when Sunderland came down, for example, even though it didn't go to plan, when Ipswich came down, it didn't go to plan. There's no reason to think that with Leicester and Sheffield Wednesday, they're certainly going to be one of the best teams in the league, but they obviously have the potential to be. But they also have the potential to be teams that, like the ones I just mentioned, could come down and initially struggle.
On the subject of the playoffs, Charlton women beat Leicester in the WSL promotion playoff. Goalless after extra time. Charlton won the penalty shootout. Goalkeeper Sophie Whitehouse saving 4 penalties. To hear more about that. And the Champions League final, and of course Bunny Shaw actually a turnaround. She was going to sign for Chelsea and then decided to stay at Man City. Tom Gary saying one of the most dramatic U-turns the Women's Super League transfer market has ever seen. Go and listen to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly, wherever you get your podcast. That is out today. And we'll do some England in part 3. Welcome to part 3 of The Guardian Football Weekly. George, Ali, as you mentioned, Ali, you have an England pod now you can focus on. We have spoken about Thomas Tuchel's radical picking 26 good footballers yesterday, and I've seen you do it was on my doom scrolling alongside houses I can't afford in various areas of Melbourne's inner north and East London. You saying this is a sensible squad, which we largely agreed on yesterday.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it was funny because I tweeted a week before the squad announcement when I was going through what I thought he was going to do, and it suddenly occurred to me that it was going to completely baffle like 2/3 of the nation and have a very strong reaction to it, which it then did. It felt like on Thursday night when the leaks were happening and on Friday morning, there was a really strong, it felt like everyone was up in arms. And then increasingly over the last few days, I feel like he actually explained himself pretty well, and anyone that's actually committed more thought than, oh my God, that player's really good, why is he not going, has kind of gone like, I kind of see what he's doing here. Yeah, this is, this is different, but like, yeah, a very clear idea of how he wants to play, like incredibly specific for every position, picking players that he thinks play well in those roles, in those areas of the pitch, rather than picking players and then working out how to play them all together on the same pitch, which we've seen. I'm bored of that. We've seen that like all the time. I don't want to watch Phil Foden tucked in off the left or playing on the right or playing as a 10 when there are better players at playing with Harry Kane as a number 9. So, yeah, I think things have kind of eased off a bit and hopefully now people can look forward to it. As you say, we're very fortunate as England football fans that we've got some pretty amazing players who are in the squad, and I prefer to focus on those rather than those left out. But certainly, like, it doesn't mean that there aren't some areas that you still wince a little bit about, like left back depth and central midfield depth. But again, like, you know, those aren't major issues to have. Let's be clear. Like, there are other nations heading to the World Cup who might have more glaring issues, let's say.
Runde Stifter in Runde Löcher is round pegs in round holes, George, which is what Tuchel appears to be doing. Do you share Ali's? I mean, I don't know if it's optimism or just a sensible review of the squad. That's different to we're going to go and bloody win the World Cup, isn't it?
I guess when you look at the players that we all thought would be the starting 11 and then the 3 or 4 most likely substitutes, they are all in the squad. So, you know, they're everyone getting kind of wound up about 2020 to 26th. These guys between them are probably going to play 100, 150 minutes in the whole World Cup, and that's if we go far. The only one that I'm disappointed about is Adam Wharton not being in the squad, because it feels like, you know, having 4 centre midfielders, albeit we've got Nico O'Reilly and Reece James who can both play centre midfield if needed. Having someone of Wharton's passing ability, I think there's room for him in a squad like this. But having said that, as you say, Tuchel has a very clear idea of what he wants from the roles in the squads. He is enlightening to hear him talking about Foden and Palmer. I've actually found it even more baffling to read and see so many people saying, like, you know, we need Phil Foden to provide that little bit of X factor to break down a low block. And I'm like, have you not watched Phil Foden play for England in the last 2 major tournaments? Like, it's the opposite has happened. And he's looked at Harry Kane and he's looked at players that thrive around Kane and how to get Kane to thrive. You look at Luis Diaz, for example, who, you know, left Liverpool and there wasn't much thinking that he would be a big loss, and he's gone to Bayern Munich, and alongside Kane, he's been absolutely sensational this season. And that profile of winger, that profile of a player that's going to make those runs in behind, either down the flank in order to get balls into the box or coming inside to be a goal threat. And that's the profile of wide player that he's chosen. And that's why Noni Madueke is a more appealing option to Thomas Tuchel than Cole Palmer or Phil Foden. So let's put a bit of trust in Tuchel. And yeah, I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but I definitely don't think the squad announcement has changed my opinion on how we're set to do.
Can I ask you, I know you want to focus on players who are in the squad rather than ones who were left out, but what did you make of the reaction of Harry Maguire and his extended family to his omission?
I was really surprised, I must admit. It made me realise that despite practically worshipping Slabhead as an England fan because of what he's done in an England shirt, maybe I didn't actually know that much about what he's like as a bloke, because I'd have thought he'd have been the really stoic, wouldn't say anything, wouldn't want to be seen to stick his head above the parapet. And look, you can't help but notice a lot of our comments on YouTube have gone, well, if Tuchel's really keen on characters, and clearly in the case of Dan Burn, he's barely talked about Burn the footballer at any point. All he's done is say how much he loves him as a bloke and how much he's bringing to the dressing room. Same as Jordan Henderson. Like, people saying, well, maybe Maguire in doing that has kind of proven why. Maybe he's actually not this incredible senior pro that a lot of people think he is. So, yeah, I didn't expect him to be in the squad anyway. Tuchel has been... he's really interesting manager to manage England, because he doesn't dodge any question at all. Yeah. It's actually quite jarring. I feel like a Gareth Southgate press conference by the end, you could pretty much predict verbatim what he would say to any question, easy or difficult. With Tuchel, it's he just can't wait to explain himself, and in a way that's really direct. And often, the press love to read between the lines and be like, oh, a manager says this about one player, does that mean they're slagging off another player? Tuchel's just happy to slag off the players that he doesn't like. And obviously slag off's an exaggeration, but he said about Maguire in March, where everyone thought he played pretty well, those were his first games in an England shirt for over a year. And he went yeah, no, I don't see him very high in the pecking order here. So and he even named who he had above him in the pecking order. He's been so explicit about so much of this stuff that really the only major surprise was that Tony was called up, because that really did come out of nowhere. He gave Calvert-Lewin and Solanke a look in March, and I don't think he liked what he saw. And I think, I don't think anyone's, as a general concept, the idea of having a third striker that's a different profile, that's a bit of a lump who you can... Slovakia at the Euros, he came on, he was a target for long throws when we were getting desperate and crosses, and scores a penalty in the shootout. I think generally as a concept we can all kind of understand that selection as well, even if it did come out of the blue.
What I really liked about the Tony selection was the talk that Tuchel and his team was sitting around talking about possible scenarios in the World Cup. And every time that happened, they kept coming back to Tony, which I just think it sounds like they're basically just in their local pub having a pint, playing a game. And they're like, right, okay, 1-0 down, we get a penalty. Who do we want? Ivan Toney. Okay, that's one for him. 1-0 down, need a target man up front. Kane's injured. Who do we want? Ivan Toney. Okay, perfect. Yeah, let's call him up. It just seems incredibly the way that you or I would pick a squad.
All roads lead to Ivan Toney. Exactly. Look, good luck with your pod. We will no doubt chat to you.
Thank you.
If you're happy to, while we're away doing the whole thing. The Bank of Scotland have unveiled a limited edition £20 note featuring an image inspired by Scott McTominay's overhead kick. Fans will have the chance to win 50 of the 100 notes in the coming weeks. All notes should, even though it's a cashless society, should have overhead kicks on them, shouldn't they? Trevor Sinclair, of course, the £100 note.
I'll tell you, if you ever tried to spend a Scottish note in London, for example, you can't get rid of them for love or money.
Especially if someone's drawn an overhead, someone's taking an overhead kick on it, they'll take one look at that going, this is not a real thing. No Real Madrid players in the Spain squad for the first time ever, which did, made me raise an eyebrow, but I don't know how many top Spanish players are in the Real Madrid squad.
It was worth two that were expected. Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's not that huge a surprise.
No. And 19,000 Man City fans went to Pep's leaving party. That's too many people at a party, isn't it? Anything more than 20, really. You're not going to get around and chat to everyone. He got video messages from Michael Jordan, Tommy Fleetwood and Neil Warnock. What a band that would be tonight. singing the songs.
Did you see the Michael Jordan clip?
I haven't yet. Obviously on my list of things to do.
Michael Jordan said, you've had an amazing career. Congratulations on your retirement. Which...
Right. So there we
I
go.
didn't-
Pep's
well, I
done.
didn't- yeah,
Broken
he's done.
by Michael
That's
Jordan.
it.
But
Yeah.
that's it. Is Michael Jordan
Well,
the new Jim White? I'm
Michael
hearing.
Michael Jordan, famously one of the great retirement and then
Retires.
comebacks
Yeah,
of all
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
he's just trying to set that up for Pep.
Let's get one of these wedding emails out of the way, Barry. Go with this whole right. It's our fault if we read them out. More will come. But James Horgan says, "Dear Football Weekly Pod, my name's James. I'm an Irish lad living in Boston, Massachusetts. Before I forget, I hope Max has recovered from solo parenting. She returned 3 hours ago. Oh, I feel 10 feet tall and is banking those days for a trip of his own. Well, I am going away for 6 weeks in 2 weeks, but I am working every day, but that doesn't seem to count. I've been listening to the pod for several years. It's provided great company during the years, and without making too much of this about me, I really appreciate the perspective you give me on life's ups and downs through the medium of football. My longtime friend Patrick introduced me to this podcast. I can't think of a better present than being graced with a blessing from Barry ahead of his big day. We never thought this day would come, as Patrick was very much like a mid-table team, not very motivated to go for the title. A long-time United fan, although they aren't in the Champions League final this year, Patrick will get some silverware of his own when he marries the wonderful Molly on Saturday. Cheers, pod. Up the Rebels. Yeah, Patrick and Molly.
What has happened to this podcast since we were last on, Josh?
Well, if it's not this, it's a vasectomy, but it's my fault. I sort of, it's a bit of love at the end of a pod. I'm happy with it.
There was a
It's
fellow
great, I
from
love
Cork called James Horgan in my class in school, so I don't know if that's the same one. He'd probably have mentioned it in his email if it is, so it clearly
You'd
isn't.
think he would. It would cross
Yeah.
his mind if he's emailing us, but
But anyway, he portrays Patrick like the Stoke City of relationships, basically, which I'm not sure Molly is marrying well, but best of luck to them anyway.
yeah, absolutely. A couple of years and she'll realise no one can get a tune out of Patrick and she'll move on, but no one will judge her for it. Anyway, that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Cheers, George.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Ali.
Cheers, Max.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, boys.